Okay. I want to welcome everybody to our cosmic stream. We're going to be joined today by Grace. Tell us how to pronounce your name for those of us who don't know.
Yeah, well, my family's Puerto Rican, so we have a second last name. So my name is Grace Flores-Arbolay.
All right. We're also joined by Tesi, who is the owner of Neutral Zone Studios and the creator of Tales from the Neutral Zone, and Skip Morris, who is our good friend and also played Grace's father in the film. Now, I want to start a little bit with you, Grace. I think that this whole thing has a genesis in a little film that's called The Lost Starship.
Oh, goodness, yes.
Yeah. And this is a film we all made about a year and a half ago that is done very well. And so what I want you to do, though, is tell us a little bit about you so we know who you are. And before we, how did you get involved in Star Trek fan films?
Yeah. Okay, well, I fell in love with acting, I think, when I was like 14. I did like a theater camp with a friend of mine, and I went, wow, this is what I need to do with my life. And that kind of shaped, honestly. Well, I've always been quite the extrovert, and then I found my people, and I went, oh, so this is what my life is supposed to be. But I was doing a community theater show called Hope in the Heartland, and Vic Mignogna happened to be in our cast, just randomly happened to be in our cast. And I will never live this down. He was wearing a Star Trek Continues shirt, and I had never seen Star Trek Continues, didn't even know what it was. And I literally went up to him and went, "Are you a Star Trek fan?" And he went, "Yes." I think like 2 years later, because we did that show every year for a good while, for about a couple years. 2 years later, I happened to be in the green room while he was casting The Lost Starship. And I was like, oh my gosh, I heard the word Klingon. Are you doing another fan film? That's so cool. And he looked at me like this. And eventually he asked me if I wanted to be in it. And I was like, of course. So my family and I went down to Florida, and we ended up being in that fan film. And it was so fun. And I enjoyed so much of it.
Wow. And that's so Vic, too, to just,
I remember him looking at me and being like, yes.
So you go down to Kingsland for the first time to those beautiful sets. You appear at how old were you when you were in The Lost Starship?
12.
We'll get to that in a minute.
Quite popular opinion. Oh gosh, hold on. I think I had just turned 18.
Wow. Okay.
I might have been 17. I'm not sure.
So you're 17 years old. You're on this movie set with all these people.
Yeah.
What was that experience like for you?
Well, first of all, it's flippin' Star Trek. So I walked into the hallways of the set, and I remember being like, oh my gosh, it's the actual set. And what was crazy is that it felt so big, and I felt so small. And I'm literally walking the corridors of a literal ship, and it made me so happy. So that being said, it was so interesting. But like coming from I have a very extensive theater background, like being on a movie set was just so different, and yet not different at all. So it was kind of just like learning to go with the flow, figuring out how things worked. And of course, Vic did a great job of like directing that whole thing and making the process really easy and smooth. And it was just a great time. I really enjoyed it. Yeah. And that's why I came back to do another one.
Okay. So here's what I believe happened. Okay. I think that you came in, and I'm going to ask Ray about this in a second. We're going to get into how
Oh,
Starchild came about. You come down, you do the Lost Starship, and everybody, I think, was looking at you, this young girl, going, she's really got it. You know,
hi.
that it factor where it's like, as Steve Martin described it in that one movie, it's like everything this person does, you're interested. You were so much of acting and performing is just being able to do it without fear, not getting nervous, being able to be on camera and just be yourself and let go,
Mhm.
and embrace your character. And you were able to do that. Ray was seeing in the Lost Starship. Was that the genesis of, hey, I've got to put her in something else, something bigger for her?
Well, yes, that was it. And I happened to have Starchild already written. Had never cast it, never produced it, but it was already written. And it was written, a number of years ago. And it morphed into something else that never got released. It did get filmed, it never got released. And I had always been looking for somebody to play Adira in that as the lead. And, Gracie rose to the occasion, and I said, I think she would be great for the part. And so that's how she came about. It was very easy genesis, but I don't know if she thought I would really go through with it or actually film it. Sometimes I get that reaction, but I wanted her, and we had, good cast from the Lost Starship and a couple of other people who were friends of the studio, and it morphed into what we saw earlier tonight.
So as I sometimes do with these productions, I got involved a little late in the process, where it was like a week before, like, can you come down and help us out? And so Ruth did me the favor of getting me a plane ticket. We came down. I think what's really going to be like, I think the wow factor for this film is we shot it in not even one day. We shot it in less than a day.
Yeah, and it was exhausting, but it was great.
So talk about that performance. The Lost Starship was one thing. The Lost Starship we shot in 4 days. We had 4 days to comfortably shoot that film. This film was a 1-day shoot because we shot like 4 different things while we were down there that weekend. We shot Starchild. We shot the next film we're going to release, which is called Second Star to the Left. And then we did 2 treks in 90 seconds. One is Tough to Kill, which is already out. And then Throne of Zeus, which we're working on now. So Grace, a 1-day shoot, what was that like for you?
Oh gosh. It was probably one of the most rewarding experiences I've had. I won't lie, it was exhausting for sure, because I know there were moments where we had decided to change something in the script because it just needed to flow better at that point from what we were doing. And like trying to remember that and also trying to perform was also really hard. And again, I'm used to a theater background where we literally have 4 to 6 weeks to rehearse a show, put it together, perform it for an audience. And I literally just memorized the script and it was go time. So that honestly was a huge adjustment, and having to like think on my feet almost the entire day was so fun. I loved it, but also it was a very, I wouldn't say stressful. It was just a very tiring experience, but I loved every second of it. It was great. And the camaraderie we had off stage was lovely too.
Hey,
Josh,
can I ask
you a question real quick?
Yeah,
can I
go
ask
ahead,
you a quick
Skip.
question, Gracie? So being a stage guy also, wouldn't you say that it kind of equates nicely that you have 6 weeks to perform or to get ready for a stage show, but when it's show day, you're in front of a live audience. So it kind of equates with go time when the camera's ready. It's kind of the same thing once you get to that point.
Exactly.
You know
and it was nice to have like that many people. There was a lot of people like watching behind the camera too. So I felt like I had someone to perform to, which helped a lot.
Right.
Ray, you had a thought.
Yeah, one last thing about casting Gracie. because it's been a long time, and you have to, these memory cells die. But I think there was a group of us after the whatever we were filming, and I think we might have been at Ops. Yes, it was after the Lost Starship, and it was their karaoke night. And I remember saying to Gracie, "Forget what we did, Gracie. Forget that." I remember looking at Gracie and saying, "Could you play a 12-year-old?"
Of course.
And she said, "Of course."
I mean, I already am. Like,
yeah. And at that point, I said, "Okay, she's in." And by the way, she's 12 because of a skip line in the Lost Starship.
Thank you.
Okay, Skip, to enlighten our audience, if they haven't seen the Lost Starship, what we're referring to.
Well, her and I are the helmsman and navigator, and we have a little bit of a kind of a brother sister kind of relationship that I really hoped came through that way. A little good natured ribbing goes on between us, and there's one line where she says something, profound or whatever about the Romulans, and my comment was, "What are you, 12 years old? Like, how would you know?" And she gives me the evil eye, and that was a kind of a big moment for our characters. We hoped came through, that showed our relationship and our friendship. But now it's just a running joke between her and me.
Well, I'm so sorry. Even more so, I remember Vic literally telling me that he wrote that in for that one moment, and I remember being like, "Thank you so much."
Well, I mean, and you're very young, of course, and then we have this cast of more seasoned people around you. So I guess that's what the film terminology is. You hang a lantern on it. Instead of it being some weird thing, you just kind of go with the flow there. So Skip, want to get to you and your involvement with this film. This was a little bit bigger of a role for you. Tell me about your experiences being in a few Neutral Zone films and what this one was like for you.
This one was great. I love being in your I love watching you direct. Watching Josh direct is like he's like a tornado. Just like, what do we do? Four in one weekend or something? You did.
Yeah, we were shooting all weekend. Yeah,
and like, yeah, if you try to talk to Josh, just be ready to have a tough exterior, because his answer is going to be short, because he's on a mission and he's getting through. And if you want to talk to the real Josh, you do it later that night. Once he gets done with business, because it is like he is like on a mission. But it's a lot of fun because he knows what he wants. He's a good actor's director. Especially, if you're involved in the writing, that helps too. You know what you want from a scene. And being that we're a fan film, you have people that are, some more experienced in acting, some less. And when you have a director like that who can pull out the performance that they want, or nuances that they want, or a stress on a certain word or something like that helps those people, and it just makes you have a better film in the end. So it was a lot of fun. These things are all done with a lot of love, both for the material and all for each other. I think we have a great kind of group of people that comes together to do these things.
Well, there's definitely a lot of love for what goes on at Neutral Zone, and I think that the thing that people don't either know or appreciate about Neutral Zone is there's so many good people there. I mean, it is a family atmosphere of people that show up, not just because they love Star Trek or not just because they love film. They love each other. Like everybody, there is not ever contention on a Neutral Zone set. There isn't. Not in the, 5 years or whatever that I've been directing films there. Like, we're always having a good time. No one's ever getting pissed off. It's like, whether it's you, Skip, Michael Sean Carter, Terry Stanford, just all of the great people that show up, like Grace, or, we have a good time every single shooting day we're there.
Yeah, agreed. One of the things that I used to say, I'll probably start saying them again, But when we get together and in the occasions where we do a table read before shooting, we didn't have that luxury shooting 4 films. But where we have a table read, I always start by telling people it doesn't matter how well you act because nobody's going to win an Academy Award. But give it your best. You know, if the script calls for you to, you know, rock in your chair and move because the ship has just been hit, just follow the instructions. And there are, you know, I've had my hand at directing. Vic has done a marvelous job at directing some of our films, but Josh, he does a great job. So don't tell him I said that, but he does a great job.
Well,
Right.
you know, it's interesting because I will say that with regards to like being an actor's director, I think that where I really grew with that came from, you know, the 8 days that I was on set watching Vic during both the Test of Time and the Lost Starship, where I really did pay a lot of attention to what he was doing. And the thing is that Vic he'll kind of break the so-called cardinal rule of directing actors, and he'll give line readings, he'll get right in there with an actor and coach them. And he was just like, you know, you got to put yourself in the mindset of like, what if you were the actor playing this character? And if you have a fan film actor that's maybe less experienced, that you know, it's one thing if you have like a Tyler Donovan or somebody who is really, really serious about acting and you can just let them go and trust them. But also it's a matter of respecting the actor. If it's someone like that, if it's someone like Jeff Johnson, that's a totally different story. You maybe give them some motivation and let them go. But if it's a less experienced actor, sometimes you have to get in there and kind of, okay, let's go through this together and guide them in something, you know, because if some people, if you don't do that, they'll just kind of show up and say the lines. And so in some ways you're helping them to elevate what they're doing. It elevates their performance. It doesn't make them look bad in the film. And the result for the film is better overall if you're not timid about it. And I could be really timid about it in the past, and watching his approach to that, which is, you know, in depth, he really does get in there, but at the same time, he's not rude about it. He's very respectful and he's very kind about it. And so I watched that a lot, and then I sort of integrated that into my own repertoire of how I work, which a lot of times, unfortunately, is just, it's me directing and me behind the camera and me doing 10 things. And that's why I'm like a tornado on set and I'm always going, because if I'm not working, nothing is getting done. And with this one, with Starchild, it was literally like, you know, Ruth reaching out to me saying, hey, we really need you to come out. And so, you know, I caught a plane and came out there, and I think I'd maybe even only read the script for both films one time before we shot them. And I mean, there were parts of Starchild where it was like, we were going to shoot on the bridge, then we moved to the quarters, then we moved back to the bridge, you know, and it was like we were having to do so much in one weekend that we were having to change the schedule on the fly to maximize our time. So it's like, this person's in this makeup job. Okay, as soon as they come out, we need to go ahead and shoot. So let's move to the bridge.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, show me this scene, you know, and everybody would kind of act it out. And then I would give some notes, and then, you know, and one of our guests made the comment, like, was it a lot of one takes? Not so much a lot of one takes, but a lot of, if you watch the film, scene oneers, where an entire scene is one shot. You know, like a transition to the Jeffries tube, or even that first scene in the captain's quarters, really only one shot. So there was a lot of that. Ray, give us your take on that crazy weekend. It really was something else.
Well, there's a lot that went on, and you're right, a lot of movement. Because we had the 2 treks in 90 seconds, so we were moving into different areas. And while you were shooting, while we were all acting and shooting and whatever we were doing, somebody was somewhere else setting up for a completely different scene from a completely different episode. And I remember that I was in engineering and they were setting up the blue screen, and I came back. Can't remember what scene you were shooting, but you weren't shooting anything, that took place in engineering. So it was just lots of movement. The thing that, there's a couple of things. One is, I think, and you sort of said it earlier, Josh, where, the crew is a family. And the crew was a family, and they were all my friends, your friends, our friends. And when you have a family, I think it's easier to get the work done because nobody's, on anybody's back. Nobody's looking to get a line in that they hadn't had before. And I've been through that in the past. And when you're a family, you act. Your performance is like a family. And the one I really want to call out is the relationship between Gracie, Adira, and her sister, who was played by Katie Munson. And I looked at this now about 5 times since we got the rough cut and then the final cut and, putting it up on YouTube. And those 2 battle out just like sisters. And they had never met each other before we started filming. And we started filming almost immediately that we got to the studio. So, having a relationship like that, having a performance like that, where you really think that the actors are related in some way is, I don't know that I'd call it unique, but certainly in a fan film, on the levels that we shot and the speed we shot, I'm very impressed with the both of those performances. And by the way, and I think Gracie, you might remember, Katie was not originally a character in the story. And when I read what I thought was the final cut, there were things going on between Adira and her mom that didn't make sense. We needed somebody else to be in there to get her out of a scene, which is why Katie goes off to the rec room and the mom leaves Adira to go hide by herself. There was no logical reason for her to do that. Why wouldn't she get in the Jeffries tube with her?
Yeah.
So it had to write in that character.
An interesting note about Katie too is that she did the voice of the computer as well, the standard computer.
Yeah.
Which that was just a deal where we were talking about that on set, and she was kind of doing it. And then we had done that when I was at Warp 66 making a film called Mother with Dan Reynolds. His wife Kelly Reynolds does an amazing TOS computer voice. Just like first rate. And so I'd kind of drawn inspiration from her performance. And so when we were talking about doing it with Katie, I was like, okay, you do it like this. And she embraced that. And we literally just recorded that on my phone, like sitting on the bridge. And I put it in. And then of course the M5 or the M6 is me. I didn't know. That was me, and I did a little AI, trickery to kind of blend my voice.
That makes sense, because I was like, I didn't think that was you.
Yeah, it was me. So funny story with that. I wanted to, I was able to emulate the voice of the M6 computer, but I didn't want it to completely be that voice because then you're getting into some weird territory there. So you can do a thing called voice transform. So I voiced it and played around with it until it was like 70% my voice and like 20% the M5 computer voice. And so it was kind of its own new interesting thing. And then, you know, had to insert, of course, like the voice effects and all of that. But so it was kind of a little bit of a journey to find the balance of making it sound like the M5 computer voice, but still kind of being me. And so that was kind of my my fun part of doing that. So one thing that I want to talk about, and this is something that's very important to me. You go back to the original show, and you know, of course, it's Captain Kirk. It's the '60s. We're making TOS era fan films, but we're doing it in the 2020s. And you know, TOS was revolutionary for its time. That it really was the Starship Earth that had probably one of the most diverse crews of its day. We're trying to do that a little more. And of course, that manifests itself in films like this one, where our star is a woman and our star is Latina, which is amazing. And, you know, there are at times fans that struggle with that are fans of TOS, and they're kind of vocal and they struggle with wanting to connect with that. It's really important to us. We're not going to stop doing it. Grace, for you,
Yeah.
how important is it to be that character, to be the person that Gene Roddenberry's vision of the future was about all humans? Star Trek is about humanity. How important is it for you to be a vehicle in driving the diversity of Star Trek forward in fan films?
Yeah. Wow. To be perfectly honest, I think we've made such strides in history and the future and like the age that we are in today that I don't think I thought about it. It was so natural to just get to do something that you weren't typecasted because of your race. And it's really interesting because my mom happens to be from Ohio and my dad is Puerto Rican. So I'm very much like got both cultures going on. So a lot of the times, like I kind of forget sometimes that I happen to be Hispanic. And then there's other moments where I'm like, rah, yeah. But being able to really just not, first of all, not have to worry about that, which is a wonderful thing that our culture is moving towards. And second of all, being able to even continue to grow that inclusivity. And that was like the one thing that I remember watching when I was a kid, because my parents were huge Star Trek fans and that's how I got into it. But the biggest thing to me was I loved how everybody was from a different place. And my favorite was Uhura because she was incredible. And again, I didn't realize how controversial that was in the 60s. And now we're in the 2020s and we've made strides to here of where we are today, and like being able to continue that inclusivity of all of people as people and bringing that mission into the film, I think is amazing. That, and I'll touch on this with Katie. I mean, we don't necessarily look like we're sisters, but we also could be, but you're not drawn to that. That's not the focal point of like, are they sisters? Like, that's not the point. The point is the story. And the story is that there's these two girls who are having this moment, as you said, which is really funny to me because offset, we were like best friends and we had never met each other, but we had a great time. We were having all of the girly moments. But again, and then of course our mom, who is very much not his like of our facial features or anything whatsoever. But again, that's not the point. The point is the story. The story is what we're here to see, not the racial divide, not the segregation. Like what we're supposed to see is a family. And I think that's what we did. And I love that we got to continue that mission. Yeah.
So for me, you know, if I make the attempt to write a character, I tend to start with writing the character as an explorer, a scientist, an engineer, more than anything else, and build from there. Ray, how important is it to you? These are your films. How important is it to you to have them be diverse, uh, representative of our modern day? But it's TOS era. You're still trying to honor that. Talk about that balance and how important that is to you.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to answer that in two ways, Josh. First one is it's very important. In the first film we did at the Neutral Zone, which was The Looking Glass, Leslie was our female captain. And when that first got released, I wouldn't call it backlash, but there were a lot of comments about having a woman captain. In The Test of Time, our captain is black. And he plays a very dynamic role. Katie is Latino. The downside to all that is it's hard to find people locally or even bring them in who are that diverse. I mean, I'm always looking. And we've managed to do it. But I really do try to emulate the original spirit of Star Trek, of Gene. It's not always easy, but when I write, I'm usually I'm not really looking to write for a character based on their ethnicity or nationality, but I'm always thinking about what that character should look like. And so that really is a driving force in when I try to put something down on no longer paper, but when I try to write dialogue.
Skip, what's your perspective on Star Trek? You're probably like a guy kind of like Vic, where the original show was a big part of your falling in love with Star Trek. Now we're moving into a different era. We're trying to do things. Gene Roddenberry was progressive for his day. He got away with what he can get away with.
Right.
The network said, get rid of the guy with the ears and get rid of the woman, and he kept the guy with the ears and he married the woman. As a person who grew up loving the original series, good friend of Vic, but at the same time, being part of what Star Trek is today, what is the perspective for you?
Well, I guess TV in general, or fan films, movies, whatever, things that you watch, they're primarily entertainment, but we can all be better teachers. And yeah, Star Trek was about inclusion. There are strides taken in fan films now that would have kind of stretched what they did in the 60s, but it needs to be done. And I think the great thing about what makes it work is when you're writing a story, the story is the most important thing, like Gracie said earlier. The second thing is to have characters that you care about. And once you have those two things, you can put the characters in whatever combination you want. Say so-and-so is related to so-and-so, whether they look alike or not. If you buy into the story, you're giving permission to be told a story. And then it doesn't matter what those people look like. You totally buy in. So the more, I think that's great. The more diversity that we have, if it can be a lesson to other people, or if it can open somebody's eyes to say this is possible, I think that's great. And I think we do a great job of it.
I think that the way that you approach it is very important, because I think that at times there have been some mistakes made in the approach that have made it difficult for some people to watch, some people to accept. It's a mistake that I've personally made, and I always refer to it as, you don't have to nerf Superman to make Supergirl strong. So if you go back to the Arrowverse, that was big, prominent over the past decade, a lot of what they did was they would try to nerf Superman to make Supergirl like, oh, Supergirl's stronger than Superman. You never had to do that. And I think that it did turn a lot of people off when things like that happened. And I know that early on in my fan film journey, I kind of had a character, and it's on me. It's not on the actress. It's not on anyone else. I had a character that was a Mary Sue, and that was on me. You know, I wrote her and built her up at the expense of other characters. In fact, two very specific male characters kind of, you know, took the brunt of that. And I've always kind of looked back and said, okay, I didn't need to do that. And it became very important to me to do two things. Inclusivity does mean that everyone's there. Mm-hmm. So we're not going to stop having the male characters. We're not going to stop having male heroes. That's not going to stop happening. When you talk about everyone's there, everyone's there. But at the same time, you give more impact to a hero character who is a woman if you make that hero's journey meaningful. Mm-hmm. And so what's become very important to me is to write the same type of hero's journey that you would for a woman that you would for a man, where she struggles, where she has insurmountable odds, where she has a strong antagonist. And, you know, we're going to be going into, for Avalon, on the Avalon side of it, we're going to be making the leap to the 24th century very soon. And we're going to have a new lead actress and a new lead hero female character. There's going to be hero male characters too, but the female hero character is going to have lots of flaws. She's going to struggle. She's going to grow. You have to have protagonism. You have to have change. The character has to learn, grow, earn victories. Yeah. And, you know, like going back to the Arrowverse again, and sorry to kind of take over for a second with my observations, but people were frustrated with, for example, the final episode of The Flash, because for 9 years, you'd be following the Flash as he grew incrementally. He learned, he got better, he became a better hero every season. And you get to the last episode of that show, you've been following this guy as he grows as a hero for 9 years. And suddenly in the finale of the show, he's a moron and he's losing every battle and he's getting rescued by the girls. And people were frustrated with that. You don't have to do that. I think what's more important is legitimizing that minority or that hero who is a woman by doing that same journey, growing, failing, learning, and making it a complete journey. We want to uplift women because it's that time. It's important. But if that victory for that character is unearned, then it's not as satisfying for the audience, and it's really probably not fair for that character. So, you know, that's kind of my take on it. And the last thing I want to do before we move on to another topic is I want to give some perspective on this.
Good, because I have words.
some perspective. There have been 79 episodes of the original series with Captain Kirk as the captain. There have been 150 some odd episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation with Picard as the captain. There have been 100 some odd episodes of Enterprise with Scott Bakula as the captain. There have been 13 Star Trek movies with Kirk or Picard as the captain. There's no shortage of people who look like me being the hero in Star Trek. No shortage whatsoever. Do you know how many episodes there are of Star Trek total where an African-American woman is the captain? 20. Out of 900. 900. There are roughly 20 episodes where a woman is the hero of the show and the captain. 20. And so if you think that this is some big trend that's destroying the world or everything, have some perspective about this. There's no shortage, and it's time to, I think, to give other people the spotlight. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
So, Grace, if you do if you do have to go, that's fine. You can go whenever you need to. But you know, we really appreciate you, and we appreciate the performance that you gave. And I kind of suspect this is not going to be the last one for you because, like I said, you've got that it factor. You're an amazing performer, a wonderful person to be around. Just give us your final thoughts about these two experiences, the people you met, and would you want to do it again?
Okay. Yeah. Oh gosh, so many things. I love what, I'll start with what you had just said. I love what you said about legitimizing females in storylines, because I think a lot of the time the effort to either make a female a main character in order to empower her, people forget we're human. People forget we're the same type of human. People forget that we're the same species. And simply because we've had such a difficult past history of not being taken seriously, that we have to make us either superhuman or we have to make us less than human. And it frustrates me because we have the same struggles. We have the same growth. We just approach it differently because that's how we naturally do things that is not often seen. So I love what the idea of, like, again, legitimizing female roles in actual films of, like, you might not like her. She might not be the best person in the world. Granted, maybe she is a Mary Sue. But a lot of the times we women try to be. And that's not something that is wonderful, but it's not terrible. But the fact that we're now finally bringing awareness to that sometimes we don't always have to be a Mary Sue, that we can really start looking into what is a female perspective and approach to a hero's journey? How would we do it in a way that might be different? And again, it could be the same, it could be different, but the fact that we're approaching the story to be credible is what I find really important. And what I loved about the film that we did is that, again, she had to work for that. She had to work for that degree. She had to work harder than almost everybody else because she had to prove herself in a way that only she saw she could. And when she was faced with an actual situation, I mean, at the very beginning, she was scared. She didn't know what to do. She's 12, if not 11. But at the same time, she rose to the occasion because she had to, and she needed to, because more was on the line than just a promotion. It was her family. Her family was what was important to her. And that's honestly what I really connected with most with the script, is because family is incredibly important to me. Might be the Hispanic influence right there. But again, there are more factors that influences a person's journey and a person's morals and a person's core values than just their one goal that might be represented in the story. And that's what I really loved about this particular episode, and getting to embody that for people as best as I could. But I loved that whole day. It's just so memorable in my mind because, again, like you said, we were going back and forth between different scenes and it was crazy. And I, again, as a stage actress, like, it's very streamlined one way. And we were going back and forth and it really stretched me in ways that I didn't know I could do. And I loved that. And we had our pranks. We kept putting clothespins on everyone's clothes, me and Katie, and everybody loved it. And it was just a wonderful time, and I will gladly do it again.
You know, you said something I really liked about your motivation for the character, and it was family.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, of course, the thing that we reveal, if you've seen the film, hopefully, is that it was essentially a test.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, if you kind of look at it and go, well, she didn't fight aliens or anything. Well, that really wasn't the point. It was, you know, I'm going to have Ray explain what his inspiration for this plot was. But it's like, for me, where she proved herself in this film was very simple. It was just overcoming fear.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she's up in that Jeffries tube. She's hearing phasers going along everywhere. And I tried to do that with the sound mix, that, like, there's guys screaming, there's explosions, there's phasers going everywhere. For me, that moment for her, even if she didn't have to fight an alien, was just having the courage to get up and jump out of the Jeffries tube and do something. Obviously, if it's an evaluation, if it's a test, Starfleet's not going to actually endanger a child. And so in my mind, what they were doing is they were creating a test just to see, would she take action? Ray, you had a very specific inspiration for this plot. Can you kind of tell us about that and your take on that?
Sure. So it's based on, or loosely based on, an episode of Next Generation where Wesley is taking a test to see if he can join Starfleet Academy. And that always stuck in my head that would be a good thing to do, whether it was original series or not, but a good thing to do, just like at the beginning of Wrath of Khan, where there is a test. In that particular case, everyone knew it was a test. Everyone knew it was a test. And Wesley did not. Wesley didn't know it was a test. And I wanted to try to convey that everybody knew it was a test except Gracie. And there was a scene, which I don't know that it really came out the way it was, the way I had intended or written it. But when Adira's mom leaves her at the Jeffries tube, when Adira starts walking up, her mom kind of looks away from the camera like, okay, done my job. It didn't quite come off that way, but I drew on that as that test. I mean, I've done it to my kids, I've just created a situation where, what would you do? And I used to say when the kids were real small, if you don't know what to do, think to yourself, what would Dad do? And I approach the character probably in very much the same way.
Well, hold on a second. There we are.
I'll stay on. It's okay.
One thing I want to talk about, one of the comments here just a second ago about Turnabout Intruder. That's something when we make these TOS fan films comes up a lot. Especially if we put a woman in command, somebody is citing Turnabout Intruder, which is very frustrating. But what I'll point out about Turnabout Intruder before I go any further is the actress who played Janice Lester was brilliant.
Brilliant.
I mean, brilliant in her performance, where she played both Janice Lester and Kirk. And in that performance, you can really see Kirk in her eyes. And that's something that I really loved about what she did. Shatner, of course, had more fun just being hysterical. And if you ever see him in a convention, have Vic do those moments like, it is mutiny! He'll do it for you. And it's really funny. But that episode is very frustrating to me. And it is an example of the mindset of the day. It really is. It was written by someone who had the mindset of the day that women are hysterical, women can't be in charge, blah, blah, blah. And if anything, the actress who plays Janice Lester sort of defies in her performance that notion, because she just takes command of that episode. For me, you go back to, for example, Court Martial. And there's this scene where, Kirk's on trial and he's talking about Ben Finney, and he seems to insinuate for a moment that these spaceships are nuclear powered. He's like, well, they left open the door to the atomic matter piles, and that was just an example of, whoever wrote that episode thought, well, the word atomic sounds futuristic, so we're going to use that. But the guy didn't, they really hadn't established how these spaceships work. Well, 50 years later, no one sits around and goes, well, those ships are powered by nuclear power. No one does that. But everyone wants to bring up in Turnabout Intruder, they said a woman can't be a captain, which they really didn't say. You could, if you wanted to play Bible scholar about it, where it's like, well, what she really said is his world of starship captains doesn't admit women. You could interpret that to mean Kirk just didn't have time for a relationship because he was a starship captain. But, for me, when I've done, including my Tales from the Neutral Zone episode that I wrote, there was an explanation for why that was going on. So just, wrapping up with that, I think that
just if
I
I
think
could
it's a
add to
terrible
that,
episode.
I could add to that for a second.
Go ahead, Ray, please.
When I write stories, and I have my friend of, I don't know, a million and a half years, Don Horan. When we write stories, you always want to close the gap between the character and the situation. I don't know how better to explain that. So you don't want to leave a situation where somebody who's watching it will go, well, why didn't you do that? Or why didn't this happen? You always want to close the door. And I agree with you 100%. And especially when you're dealing with, characters that might not seem to be the norm. You want to make sure that character is whole. Yes, and you're right, that character has some sort of growth or proves themselves as to why they are in that position. A lot of times, you watch some of these movies, even in like Alien, the guy who was in charge, the whoever he was, the lieutenant, he would freeze. Well, how did you get to be that person? How did you get in that rank if you can't take command when the time calls for it? So, you have to think about those things, at least when you're writing. And then as you're directing, you have to be able to have the actor convey, what the story is trying to convey. And that's not an easy thing, but some people will accept it. Some people won't.
Exactly. And, um, with your story in particular, Ray, The Looking Glass, you have a captain who's a woman who makes a mistake, and she's held accountable for it.
Yes.
And she holds herself accountable
Yes,
for it.
exactly. She holds herself accountable.
And so there's the struggle, the journey, but also the accountability. Those are all important elements that still have to be there.
Yeah.
And for me too, it's been important for me to get a woman's perspective in the writing and creation process. And, I did that in the beginning of making the fan films, and it's something that I want to do again. And so I'm going to be inviting a couple of people to be consultants where I can send them scripts and script ideas and say, give me your thoughts on this. And, I've got some interesting people in mind that I think they're, these are very wise individuals who have a lot of great life experience that are, gone down the road a little farther than I have. And I can reach out and say, hey, what do you think about this? So it's something that I'm looking forward to because, on the Avalon side, Tales from the Neutral Zone, we're going to keep doing that. On the Avalon side, we got a new adventure coming. Now, with Neutral Zone Studios, Tales from the Neutral Zone, Ray, what do you want to tell us about where the studio is at and the future of the studio at this point? What you can share with us and where you are right now?
Well, I am in very cold Ohio. Temperature looks like my finances. It goes up, it goes down. It goes up, it goes down. So we are in Sandusky, Ohio, and we are in the Sandusky Mall. They have graciously allowed us to use what was an old TJ Maxx location. So we've just got, and we know what we want to do with it, but we've got more room than when I first started. And didn't know what I would do with it all. We've got a great team leading the way. While I am a part of the team, I am not the great part of the team. We have Scott Little, and Scott is a professional self-set builder. And we have Michael Sean Carter, who just has been at my hip when we started taking down the sets and transporting the sets, and now, putting these sets back to what they were originally. And there are some challenges, but what we've decided was we're repainting everything. We're fixing cracks, we're fixing pieces that are broken, but we are giving a fresh new coat. Remember, these sets are, 14, 15, 16, some of them might even be 17 years old. And when we took our first set of flats and did a repaint on it and looked at them next to the old flats, I just can't tell you how thrilled I was that, hey, this thing is going to look brand new. It's the same flats, same props, everything's the same, but it's going to look very, very, very clean. It's probably my best comment. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. There's maybe 100 flats that need to be addressed and sets that need to be rebuilt. Today we moved the base of the transporter to its location of where it's going to be set up. And it took 5 people to get that thing on 2 dollies and move it. So we're very pleased as to where we are. We're really looking to open at least part of the studio in June. It's turned out to be, breaking it down turned into a monumental task. It took us the better part of 3 months and 6, tractor trailers to get those pieces here to Ohio. And it's just like playing, I don't know, chess. Move this piece here, move that piece there, get all these pieces that are alike together. And we have some other ideas on what to do with free space, and those will come in time. I'm just still fleshing them out, so I'm not ready to talk about them. But we've also had a number of volunteers, many of them local, just come and want to help. And so when you can get 5 people in a room to do construction or painting or moving at the same time, it's really a big deal. So I have to give props to everybody else because, I'm the guy who's trying to just look at the big picture. Look at where we are, look at what needs to be done. There are many, many other things that need to be done on top of what we're doing. So it's happening. When people ask me how things are going, my answer is slow but steady, and that's the best way to describe it.
And I think that the important thing that I want to point out, and again, it's early days, so we don't have to get into specifics, but your approach this time, you've got it set up to where the studio is going to be resurrected in a new location. It's going to be beautiful, better than ever with the work of some of the volunteers that you have helping you out. And it's going to be financed in a way, we won't talk about that yet, but it's going to be financed in a way that is compliant with the IP holder. Correct. And we will be able to make fan films there for a long time, so people can feel really good about that.
That is correct. And that is the goal. And that's what we really want to concentrate on. I operated in Kingsland for over 6 years, and I learned a lot of things. And, trying to be all things to all people doesn't always work out. And the best time, we've had some great events and things like that, but making films and seeing things come to life, seeing characters come to life, is a real big deal to me. And I really want to move that needle forward. And yes, it's all going to be compliant, whether it's funding, whether it's filming. I am going to follow, the guidelines to the letter. And that's the only way that anybody should. Not everybody does. And, and that's fine. But I have a different stake in the game, I think. So yeah, there's a lot that we're going to try to offer the fan film community. Yeah.
And the last thing that I'll add is, again, emphasizing that we as fan film makers and people who participate in this community, we're grateful to the IP holder, to CBS and Paramount, for how cool they've been with us over the last 8 years, whatever it's been. We do this because they give us the grace to do it, and we're grateful, and we're going to do this as long as we're able to do it. And we're doing it for the love of Star Trek and really for nothing else.
Yeah.
So last thing, we're at right at an hour before we tune out.
Let me just throw in one more thing, if I could.
You got it, Ray.
Because you just reminded me of something. I did an interview years ago, and somebody said, "What is it about Star Trek that attracts so many fans and produces so many fan films?" I mean, there are hundreds of fan films out there. There are not that many Star Wars, although they're fantastic. You don't see any Mission Impossible fan films, So what is it about Star Trek? And I can remember saying something like, Star Trek is about the only medium where you can tell your story disguised as something else. You can get the message out. It could be topical. It could be current, but you're using this as your medium. And this is a medium that just draws people to tell their stories. And I think that's one of the things I want to carry forward with fan films, is to give people that opportunity.
Awesome. Okay, so one quick note before we, again, we're at about an hour. So like the last thing I want to say before we go, we're certainly not done. I want to shout out to some of the people that joined us. Luis Sanchez, who
hey, Luis.
Yeah, he's been here. And Luis, if you haven't seen him, he's in The Test of Time. He's in L'Amour de la Guerre. He's in
look at him
Doomsday.
He is in Doomsday. He is the character that everybody talked about, nobody ever saw.
Yeah. He's a great actor, a wonderful volunteer. He helped tear down the studio, and just an all-around cool guy. So thanks for being here, Luis. We got Michael Sean Carter with us, our friend, who I think he's playing a big role in the reconstruction of the sets. We have Terry Stanford, who she was the best lady of Neutral Zone Studios in Kingsland. And Terry, I promise you, we will find a way to get you to set when the time comes.
Terry, I have your chair.
Nice. We have our friend Keith Hamilton with us, who does all of our VFX for Tales from the Neutral Zone, and is just a wonderful, humble, amazing human being. Sean Patrick Kennedy, who is our Klingon nemesis in the next Avalon release, and is just a fun guy. If you ever get the chance to hang out with him, you really should. And we have someone joining us from Argentina. I'm really sorry. I don't want to try and pronounce your name because I don't want to mess it up, but I'm really glad that you came and joined us from Argentina. Glad you really liked Knights of the Void. We do have a continuation to that coming out this year. As for what's directly next, that same weekend, we did a film called Second Star to the Left. And that was written by our friend Ruth McCartney, who has worked as a producer on a lot of the Tales from the Neutral Zone, did so on Starchild, did so on History Never Forgets. That is going to be a very special film because, again, like this one, it's about something. That film it's sort of a meta fan film in a way. You'll have to check it out. In that it is about neurodivergency or autism. And, we have a character who lives life with that. And fandom is a big part of what helps people who are neurodivergent. And so it's going to be a meta take on that subject. We put this film through post-production in about 3 weeks once we kind of figured out when we wanted to release it. And I would expect about the same turnaround time on that film. So you might see it here in about a month to 6 weeks or something like that. So, and then we'll move on to some more Avalon films. And our hope is when we get Neutral Zone Studios back up and running, we've got our idea for the first film that we're going to shoot there. It's going to be Harry Mudd versus Finnegan.
Oh my. Oh my.
Wow.
Okay.
And which means the return of who? Jeff Johnson.
Jeff Johnson.
Jeff Johnson.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Is he an older Finnegan?
Yeah, and my concept for this is that Finnegan, when we saw Finnegan in TOS, he was at the Academy with Kirk. Well, Kirk went on and became a starship captain, so it might be kind of plausible that Finnegan went on to be a starship captain too. So we may.
You know what? I always had this opinion about Finnegan. That was Kirk's remembrance of him.
Mm-hmm.
Finnegan was probably a totally different kind of guy than the way Kirk remembered that upperclassman. He was probably a decent guy. He may have been a hell of a guy. You don't know. There's so many things you can do with that character.
Oh yeah, and Jeff and I have talked about it a little bit, and he can still do the Finnegan voice.
Oh yeah.
If you don't know this about Jeff Johnson, go back and watch The Lost Starship, and you'll see why he's such a dead ringer. But there was an earlier fan film, like 15 years ago, where he actually played Finnegan, and it lurks around on the internet. You have to really look for it. I think it's called Origins. It's a Star Trek New Voyages, but Jeff played Finnegan in that, and he was brilliant, and he can still do it. And so, yeah, Skip, part of it is that take of who is Finnegan really? And, just kind of one last Lost Starship take. Yep, exactly. Is I didn't know Jeff was going to be in the Lost Starship. So we show up, on set to do the Lost Starship, and Jeff walks in, and I was like, oh, it's Finnegan. I didn't know who he was, so he just walks in, and I was like, so Finnegan's in this movie, and I walked up to Vic, and I was like, am I going to have to stop you and Finnegan from having a fist fight? And he's just like, oh yeah, that's funny. So, but, ever since I saw him there and Jeff is like the nicest guy ever. Like, he is just a cool dude. Really easy to get along with, great actor. In real life, he's an airline pilot, but a fantastic actor and a wonderful person. And so, kind of like with Grace, you see Grace when she shows up, you go, man, we gotta make a movie with her. I saw Jeff and I was like, I got to do Finnegan. And so I started talking to him, and he's totally up for it. So, all right. Well, I want to say thank you to everyone. And yep, let's point this out. Sean Kennedy's got a very interesting idea for a fan film he's doing. So wait for that. That's going to be something. Yeah, right. It's funny. Illegal sports betting with tribbles. Thank you to everybody for joining us. We appreciate you watching our film. We consistently had about 50 people watching between the two channels. I don't know. Let's, right now it's up to, let me look. Got about 700 views on the Avalon channel. Wow. So,
but yeah, 3 or 4 on mine.
I haven't checked, but I can look at my own analytics, and it's at about 700. So that's fantastic. So everyone, thanks for joining us for the premiere, watching our film, joining us tonight. This is going to be a big year. Last year we didn't do a lot of releases because we were shooting a lot of content. So this year will be kind of like 2023, where we're going to be releasing a lot of fan films. So until next time, y'all, live long and prosper. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, little sis.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you soon.